It wasn't my wife who came out of those woods. It was wearing her skin. Nightbound Bloodline presents 5 Most Disturbing Reddit's Fleshgait Stories. The oldest forests on this earth hold more than just trees and stone. They hold rules. Ancient, silent rules that our modern minds have tried to forget. One of them is this: when something calls your name from the shadows, in a voice you recognize, you do not answer. You do not look. You run. The stories you are about to hear are not campfire tales. They are digital cries for help, testimonies from ordinary people who walked into the woods, or parked on a lonely road, or simply glanced out their backyard window and found something waiting for them. Something that knows how to wear a familiar shape. Something that hungers, not just for flesh, but for the very essence of what makes you you. These are first-person accounts of the Fleshgait. Story 1. The Thing on Heather Road. Our first account comes from a man we'll call Mark. A long-haul trucker for 15 years. A man who has seen every empty mile this country has to offer and prides himself on being unshakable. My name's Mark. I'm 42. I drive an 18-wheeler for a living. Been doing it since I was 27. You see a lot of weird stuff on the road at 3 a.m. Deer standing in the middle of the interstate. Weird lights way out in the fields. Whatever. I don't believe in UFOs or Bigfoot. Never have. If I can't haul it, weigh it, or log it, I don't waste time on it. But what happened on Heather Road, that's in a different ledger altogether. It was November. I was taking a state route through upstate New York as a shortcut. GPS had glitched, and I was tired. Saw a sign for a scenic overlook, one of those little pull-offs on the side of a mountain road. Figured I'd park, drink my coffee, and check my map. The overlook was deserted. Just a semicircle of cracked asphalt, a wooden guardrail, and beyond that, a steep drop into a sea of pitch-black pine trees. The only light came from my rig's headlights and a sliver of moon fighting through the clouds. I shut the engine off. The silence was thick. You know how sometimes the woods are full of sound? Crickets, wind, something rustling? This was dead quiet. Not even a breeze. I remember smelling the pine needles, sharp and cold, and the damp, earthy scent of rot coming up from the ravine. I was just sitting there, fumbling with my phone, when I heard it. A voice. It was a woman's voice, coming from the tree line to the left of the pull-off. Clear as a bell. It called out, "Hello? Can you help me?" Now, my first thought was, someone's car broke down. But something felt off. The voice was too smooth. Too placid. No panic for someone stranded in the woods at night. I rolled my window down an inch. "You alright?" I shouted back. "I'm lost," the voice called. It was closer now. "I'm hurt. Please, can you come help me?" I'm not a heartless guy. I reached for my door handle. But I stopped. A rule every trucker knows. You don't stop for strangers on a lonely road. And something about the way she said, "Come help me." It was like an invitation. A demand. I flicked my high beams on, trying to see into the trees. And I saw her. She was standing just at the edge of the light, maybe 20 yards away. A woman in a light-colored dress. But she was standing all wrong. Not like she was tired or hurt. She was perfectly rigid, arms hanging straight down at her sides. Her head was tilted, like a dog hearing a high-pitched noise. I couldn't see her face in the shadow. "I can't walk," the voice came again. But her mouth didn't move. It was just a dark slash in the pale blur of her face. The voice seemed to come from around her, not from her. Every hair on my body stood up. A cold sweat broke out on my back. This wasn't right. This was all wrong. "I'll call the police for you," I yelled, my voice cracking. I went to start the engine. That's when she moved. It wasn't a walk. It was a lurch. A staggering, broken kind of sprint. Her arms didn't pump. They just swung like dead meat at her sides. And she was fast. Unnaturally fast. Covering ground in these jagged, spasmodic bursts. The headlights finally caught her face full on. She had no eyes. Just deep, black sockets. Her mouth was open too wide, stretched into a grimace that showed too many teeth, all of them small and pointed like a pike's. The skin on her face was taut and waxy, like it was pulled too tight over the skull beneath. It wasn't a human face. It was a mask. A bad copy. She let out a sound then. It started as that same please, but it melted into a wet, gurgling snarl, like rocks grinding in a meat grinder. I've never started a rig so fast in my life. I slammed it into gear, peeling out of that overlook. In my side mirror, I saw her. She'd stopped at the edge of the road, right where my truck had been. She wasn't chasing. She was just standing there, rigid again, her head tilted, watching me go. I drove for 2 hours before I stopped shaking. I never reported it. What would I say? I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I know what I saw. It was wearing the shape of a person, but it was hollow inside. Something had crawled into a skin that didn't belong to it, and was trying to use it to lure something else in. I haven't taken a backroad shortcut since, and I will never, ever stop for a voice in the dark again. A hollow thing wearing a skin that didn't belong to it. This theme of imperfect mimicry, of a predatory intelligence that learns our forms to trap us, recurs again and again. It leads us to our second story, which takes us from a lonely roadside into the very heart of the home. Story 2, The Back Porch Light. Our next witness is Sarah, a graphic designer, a mother of 2 young boys. Her life was one of school runs, client deadlines, and soccer practice. Her world was defined by the soft, reassuring glow of smartphone screens and the night light in the hallway, until something outside learned to appreciate that glow as well. My name is Sarah. I was 34 when this happened. We lived in a ranch-style house in Ohio, backing onto a conservation area. It was our little slice of peace. My husband, Ben, traveled for work sometimes. This was one of those weeks. It was just me, my 7-year-old Leo, and our terrier, Baxter. The first night Ben was gone, I let Baxter out before bed. Our backyard has a motion sensor light on the porch. He trotted out, did his business, and I called him back in. Standard. The next night, same thing. But this time, the light flicked on and Baxter froze. He didn't bark. He just lowered his head, his whole body going stiff, and let out this continuous, low growl that vibrated up from his chest. He was staring into the tree line at the back of our property. I called him sharply. He backed up, never turning away from the woods, until he was inside. I shut and locked the door, feeling silly. Probably a raccoon. The third night was different. I was up late working. The house was silent. Around 1 a.m., the porch light clicked on. I figured it was Baxter, maybe wanting out. I got up from my desk and walked towards the kitchen, which has a large window overlooking the porch and the yard. Baxter was asleep on the couch. He hadn't triggered it. And then I saw him. My son Leo. He was standing on the porch, just outside the glass door, in his dinosaur pajamas. He was facing away from me, towards the yard. My heart dropped. How did he get out? Was he sleepwalking? Leo, I said, rushing to the door. My hand was on the lock when I stopped. The way he was standing. It was the same rigid posture Mark described. Shoulders squared, arms straight down. And he was barefoot, on the cold, damp porch. Leo hated being barefoot on cold floors. Sweetheart, what are you doing out here? I said, my voice tight. He didn't turn. He slowly raised one arm and pointed, with a stiff, mechanical motion, out into the dark yard. That's when the smell hit me, even through the glass. It was a sweet, coppery smell, like wet pennies and spoiled meat. It was wrong. All of it was wrong. Leo, look at me. I demanded, fear turning my voice hard. Slowly, his head began to turn over his shoulder. Not his whole body, just his head. It rotated too far, the neck craning at an impossible angle. The porch light illuminated his face. It was Leo's face, but it was slack, empty. His eyes were glassy and fixed, like painted marbles. And he was smiling. A wide, serene smile that didn't touch those dead eyes. A smile my cheerful, gap-toothed boy had never, ever made. Mommy, the thing said. But the voice was wrong. It was Leo's pitch, but flat. toneless, like a recording played back on cheap speakers. Come see. There's a deer. My blood turned to ice. Every primal instinct in me screamed. This was not my child. This was something wearing him. Something that had seen him, studied him, and stitched together this horrible facsimile. It was inviting me out. I stumbled back from the door. I didn't scream. I was too terrified to make a sound. I ran down the hall to Leo's room, my heart hammering against my ribs. I threw his door open, and there he was, my Leo, curled under his blankets, fast asleep, his breathing deep and even. The nightlight cast a soft glow on his real, peaceful face. A soft tap, tap, tap came from down the hall. It was coming from the glass door. I walked back, numb, down the hallway. The thing was still there. It had turned fully around now. It pressed its palms and face against the glass, distorting the features. That serene, awful smile was still there. It stared right at me, and then it blinked, but not with two eyelids. It was a slow, vertical blink, like a lizard's. It tapped on the glass again with one finger. Tap, tap, tap. Then the motion sensor light timed out. The porch was plunged into darkness. I stood there in the black kitchen, staring at the void where it had been, listening. I heard a sound from the backyard. A dry, rustling sound, like something heavy being dragged through dead leaves. It moved from the porch, across the yard, and into the tree-line. Then, silence. I didn't sleep. I armed the security system we never used, put a chair under the door handle, and sat in Leo's room until sunrise. We moved out 2 weeks later. I told Ben it was for better schools. I never told him what I saw. How could I? I still have nightmares about that smile. That vertical blink. It wasn't trying to scare me. I think it was trying to practice, to get the details right for next time. And the thought that it's still out there, in the woods behind some other family's home, learning, that's what truly haunts me. A mimic on the porch. A predator that studies its prey from the shadows before donning its skin. But what happens when the hunting ground isn't a forest or a backyard, but a place of absolute, sanctioned silence? Our third story takes us deep into America's forgotten corners, where the laws of man mean nothing and something older paces the boundaries. Story 3. The Border Patrol. Our third account comes from a source sworn to protect a boundary, not between states, but between nations. Vast, brutal stretches of desert where the only laws are thirst, heat, and the things that have always lived there. This is the story of Agent Reyes, who asked that we use only his surname. For 10 years, his duty was to patrol the silent, midnight expanses of the Sonoran Desert. He thought he knew every danger it possessed. He was wrong. Reyes. I served as a Border Patrol agent for a decade, out of the Tucson sector. I've seen things that would curl your hair. Coyotes abandoning migrants, cartel scouts, bodies. So many bodies. The desert consumes the unprepared. I was prepared for all of it. Or so I thought. This happened my 8th year. It was early December. Cold at night. Bone-deep cold you don't expect in a desert. My partner, Davis, and I were on a remote track, maybe 50 miles from the nearest paved road. We were looking for sign of a group that had been dropped off by a pickup earlier. Moon was a bright, cold sliver. The kind of light that turns the world into grayscale and deep, liquid shadows. We found the group. 4 of them, huddled under a scrawny mesquite tree. They weren't moving. Davis called it in. I approached, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark. They were dead, not from exposure. They were torn apart. It wasn't coyotes. Coyotes are messy. This was surgical, deliberate. Limbs were separated from torsos, not chewed, almost like they'd been twisted off. And the silence. No bugs, no wind, just a heavy, waiting silence that pressed on your eardrums. Davis was on the radio, his voice tight, saying we needed coroners and a security team. That's when we heard the cry. It came from a wash about 100 yards to the west. A human cry. A woman screaming for help. Ayadame, poor favor. Clear as a bell. She sounded terrified, injured. Protocol in a potential cartel ambush situation is to hold position, wait for backup. But that scream, it was pure agony. Davis looked at me. We were trained to help. We drew our sidearms and moved toward the sound, flashlights sweeping the brush. We got to the edge of the wash. It was a steep, sandy gully about 10 feet deep. Our lights scanned the bottom. Nothing. No woman. No footprints in the smooth sand. "Hello? Border Patrol. Show yourself," Davis shouted. The voice answered immediately. It came from directly behind us. Now? From back near the bodies. But it had changed. It was still a woman's voice, but it was melodic, almost singing. "Ayadame." We spun, lights carving arcs through the darkness. Nothing. Then, from our left, maybe 30 yards away in a cluster of Ocotillo, the voice again. Now it was a child's voice. A little boy, whimpering. "I'm lost. I'm scared." The hair on my neck stood straight up. This wasn't right. This was a trap. "We're leaving. Back to the vehicle. Now," I said to Davis. We started backing up, moving in a tactical retreat, weapons up, lights probing every shadow. That's when we saw it. Between us and our SUV. It was crouched on top of a large, flat boulder. It was backlit by the starlight, so we saw it in silhouette first. Man-shaped, but the proportions were all wrong. Too long in the arms, which rested on the rock like an ape's. Its legs were bent at a sharp, insectal angle. And its head, it was too small for its shoulders, and it was cocked to one side, listening. My flashlight hit it. The thing was hairless. Its skin was the color and texture of sun-bleached, cracked leather. It was naked, but had no visible genitalia. Just smooth, featureless skin stretched over a frame of knobs and cords that looked more like root than muscle. Its face. God, its face. It had a mouth, a wide gash that was currently hanging open, but no eyes. Just deep, dark sockets. It had a nose, but it was just two slits. It didn't flinch from the light. It just tilted its head the other way. And then it spoke. It used Davis's voice. A perfect mimic. It said, "Reyes, what the hell is that?" But Davis was standing right next to me, his mouth shut, his breath coming in ragged gasps. My blood went cold. This thing was learning our voices. It scrambled down from the boulder. It didn't run. It crawled, on all fours, but with its spine arched high, its limbs moving in a horrible, disjointed scuttle. Fast, unnaturally fast, closing the distance between us in seconds. I didn't think. I fired. 3 rounds. Davis fired 2. I saw the impact jerk its body. No blood, just puffs of dust from that dry hide. It let out a sound, a chittering, grinding scream that didn't come from its mouth, but seemed to vibrate from its whole chest. It veered off, disappearing into the darkness with that same horrific scuttling sound. We ran. We made it to the SUV, peeled out, didn't stop until we hit the highway. We told our supervisor we'd been fired upon by unknown assailants. We filed a report on the bodies, left out the thing that mimicked our voices. Who would believe us? Davis quit 6 months later. Said he couldn't stand the silence of the desert anymore. He said it felt like the silence was watching him. I finished my last 2 years, but I never patrolled alone again. And I never, ever followed a voice in the dark. That thing, it was an animal. It was intelligent. It used those bodies as bait. It used voices as a lure. It's out there, a custodian of those empty places. And it's always, always hungry. A creature of dust and mimicry, patrolling its ancient territory. The intelligence it displayed is a chilling thread that connects these stories. But intelligence implies a purpose, a goal. What is the goal of a thing that wears skin and mimics voices? Perhaps our 4th story holds a clue, a story not of an encounter, but of a discovery, a finding that suggests these beings are not just hunting, they are collecting. Story 4, The Shed in the Hemlocks. Our next witness didn't see a Fleshgait. He found where one lives. Or, perhaps, where it keeps its trophies. This account comes from a hiker, an experienced outdoorsman who strayed from the trail in the dense, old-growth forests of the Pacific Northwest. He asked to be identified only as Alex. His story is not one of a direct confrontation, but of an insidious, creeping horror that comes not from a chase, but from understanding. I'm Alex. I'm 28, a systems analyst. Hiking is my church. Every weekend, I'd lose myself in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. Maps, GPS, the whole 9 yards. I'm not reckless. But last fall, I was following a deer trail off the main path, chasing a photo of a rare woodpecker. I got turned around. The canopy was so thick it felt like twilight at noon. I knew I was lost, but I wasn't panicked. I had supplies. I decided to head downhill, following a creek, knowing it would eventually lead to a road. That's when I smelled it. Not the clean, damp smell of moss and fur. This was sweet and cloying, like rotting fruit and wet wool. And underneath it, a chemical tang, like formaldehyde. It was wrong. Absolutely wrong for the middle of a living forest. The smell led me to a clearing. And in the clearing, there was a shed. It wasn't a hunter's cabin. It was crude, made from rough-hewn, blackened logs, the roof sagging under a carpet of moss. It looked ancient, like it had grown there. But the door was modern. A cheap, white-painted interior door, like from a suburban house. It was slightly ajar. The silence here was absolute. No birds, no insects, no creak sound. Just that smell and a low, subaudible hum that vibrated in my teeth. My logical mind said turn around. This is how horror movies start. But another part, the part that needs to know, pushed me forward. I called out, "Hello." My voice was swallowed by the trees. I pushed the door open. The light from the clearing spilled in. The inside wasn't a tool shed. It was a workshop, but not for wood or metal. The walls were lined with shelves. And on the shelves were skins, not animal pelts. These were shapes, human-shaped. They hung slack and empty, like deflated suits. Dozens of them. Men, women, even smaller ones, children. They weren't tanned leather. They looked fresh, damp, the color of bruised meat and old cream. Some were incomplete, just a torso, a single arm, a hollow head with slack features sewn or fused onto it. In the center of the single room was a large, flat stone, like a table. It was stained a deep, dark brown. On it were tools, not knives. They looked like they were made of bone and sharpened antler. Awls, scrapers, things for separating, for shaping. And in the corner, piled like discarded laundry, were clothes. Modern clothes. Jeans, flannel shirts, a brightly colored child's jacket. All of them looked worn, but clean. Too clean for the forest floor. I felt a wave of nausea so profound I almost collapsed. This wasn't a lair. It was a studio, a place of creation. These things weren't just finding skins to wear. They were making them, perfecting them, practicing. That's when I heard the sound outside. A rustling, but not of an animal. It was the sound of something moving through the underbrush on two legs, but with an uneven, staggering gait. Then, a wet, clicking sound, like two rough stones being tapped together in a throat. I didn't look. I didn't breathe. I backed out of that shed, my eyes locked on the horror inside until the last possible second. I turned and I ran. I didn't follow the creek. I ran straight through thorns and over logs, driven by pure animal terror. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, and then I crawled. I made it to a logging road hours later, flagged down a truck. I told the driver I'd gotten lost, suffered heat exhaustion. I never mentioned the shed to anyone. Who would believe me? And more than that, a deeper fear stopped me. The fear that if I spoke of it, the thing that owned that workshop would know I'd seen its work, and it would come looking for the one who got away. I sold all my hiking gear. I haven't set foot in a forest since. I dream of that white door in the dark logs. I dream of those empty, waiting skins on the shelves. They weren't trophies. They were prototypes. And the thought that haunts me, the thought that wakes me up screaming some nights, is this: how many of them are finished? And where are they being worn right now? A workshop of stolen identities. a craftsman of flesh. This revelation takes the horror from a predatory stalking to something with a far more terrifying, patient purpose. It brings us to our fifth and final story, a story that suggests the ultimate goal of the mimic, not just to lure and consume, but to replace. This account, the most recent of our five, comes from a small town where everyone knows everyone, or at least they think they do. Story 5, The New Tenants on Elm Street. Our final story does not take place in a remote forest or a desolate desert. It unfolds on a tree-lined street in a quiet, middle American town, a place of backyard barbecues and neighborhood watch signs. It is a story from a woman named Clara, a retired librarian whose world was built on quiet routine and keen observation. Her horror did not come from a single, shattering encounter, but from a slow, insidious realization that the monster was not at the door, it was next door. My name is Clara. I'm 67. I've lived on Elm Street in my town for 40 years. I know the sound of every dog, the schedule of every paperboy, the way old Mr. Henderson leans on his rake at 4 p.m. sharp. This is my world. Or it was. The Millers moved into 421 last spring. A young couple, Ben and Lisa. They kept to themselves, which was fine. The problems started small. Ben, walking to his car for work. He'd always give a tight, quick wave. But his smile, it never reached his eyes. It was a muscle memory, not an expression. And his walk, so stiff, like he was concentrating on every step. Then, I saw Lisa in her garden. She was kneeling, staring at a sunflower. Not tending it, just staring. Her head was perfectly still. For 20 minutes. I only knew because I was shelling peas on my porch and I timed it. When she finally moved, it was a single, jerky motion to stand. She turned and looked directly at my house. She didn't wave. She just stared with this blank, placid look like a mannequin. I went inside. The smells came next. On certain nights, when the wind blew from the west, a foul odor would waft from their house. That same smell from the other stories, sweet rot and wet animal. My cat, Muffin, would arch her back and hiss at the fence line for no reason. The final piece was the sounds. Through the thin walls of our older homes, you hear things. I'd hear them talking at night, but the conversations made no sense. They weren't arguing or chatting. It was like language practice. I'd hear Ben's voice, flat. How was your day? A pause. Then Lisa's voice, equally toneless. It was fine. The weather was pleasant. Another pause. Ben, yes, pleasant. It was a script. A bad one. No laughter. No emotion. No variation. One Tuesday, the garbage truck came late. The Miller's bin was at the curb. The lid had fallen open. I was fetching my mail, and I glanced inside. What I saw? I wish I hadn't. At the top of the bin were empty cans, normal trash. But beneath, partially hidden, was something else. It looked like a large, fleshy sack. Wrinkled, hairless, the color of a grub. And beside it, tangled like discarded fishing line, were long, dark clumps of hair. Human hair. My blood ran cold. It wasn't proof of a crime, not the kind the police would understand, but it was proof of a change. The next evening, I saw Ben Miller mowing his lawn. The setting sun cast his shadow long across the grass. And I saw it. His shadow. It didn't match him. The proportions were wrong. The head was smaller, the arms longer, the silhouette jagged and sharp. For a few seconds, as he turned the mower, his human form and the thing casting the shadow were out of sync. It was like watching two films projected over each other. He must have felt my gaze. He stopped mowing and turned his head toward me. That same empty smile stretched his lips. But his eyes, in the golden hour light, they reflected back not a human glint, but a solid, dark, chitinous shine, like the eyes of a beetle. He raised a hand in that mechanical wave. I did not wave back. I went inside, packed a bag, and called my sister. I told her I needed a long visit. I've been here 8 months. My house on Elm Street sits empty. I pay the bills from afar. I drove by once last month. The Millers are still there. The lawn is perfectly manicured. The house is quiet. They've put up a tall, solid fence. I don't know what happened to the real Ben and Lisa Miller. I pray it was quick. What lives in their house now is not them. It's wearing them. It's learning to be them. And it's doing a better job. The most disturbing part isn't the monster in the woods. It's the monster that succeeds. The one that learns the routines, that masters the small talk, that moves in. It's the fear that one day you'll look at your neighbor, your friend, your loved one, and you'll see that their smile doesn't reach their eyes. And you'll have to ask yourself the most terrifying question of all. When did the replacement happen? And did anyone even notice? 5 stories. 5 fractures in the wall of our reality. From a roadside mimic to a backyard impersonator. From a desert predator to a craftsman in a shed. To a quiet replacement on a street where every house has a welcome mat. The common thread is not just a monster, but a process. A patient, intelligent process of observation, mimicry, and infiltration. These aren't creatures of mindless hunger. They are artists of identity. They don't just want to eat you. They want to become you. To slip into the warm space you left behind in the world. To wear your life like a suit. The Fleshgait, the Skinwalker, the mimic. The name changes, but the horror remains the same. The violation of the self, the theft of the soul. And the terrifying possibility that the thing smiling at you across the fence has nothing human behind its eyes. These digital testimonies, whispered into the void of the internet, are flares shot into the night. They are warnings. To be wary of voices that call from the dark. To trust the animal fear that curdles in your gut when a loved one stands just a little too still, smiles a little too empty. The oldest forests have rules. Perhaps our modern world needs to remember them. Do not follow strange lights. Do not answer calls from the shadows. And always question what stands behind a familiar face. If you have a story of your own, an encounter that defies explanation, we invite you to share it in the comments below. Your truth may be the warning someone else needs to hear. If you found yourself held by the dark tonight, consider subscribing to Nightbound Bloodline. Ring the bell, and you'll be notified the next time we descend into the unknown. Thank you for listening. This has been Nightbound Bloodline. Until next time, sleep with one eye open.